I ask this with great respect, but why does your party deserve them? Yes, there are 1.2 million Canadians who voted for you, but you had an 11-point-something% drop in the popular vote, the worst outcome seats-wise for your party since its inception. Like, why do you deserve parliamentary resources if you couldn't hit that number?
In a shocking non-move, the Liberal Party is denying the NDP the opportunity at gaining party status for this session, which could lead to Mark Carney's government ending in a death by 1,000 cuts.
Let's take a look. Interim NDP leader says party will play important role despite loss of status.
Ottawa. Interim NDP leader Don Davies said Monday the party will still play a, quote, profoundly important role, end quote, in this parliament, even though it won't be granted official party status. Government House Leader Stephen McKinnon said Monday morning the NDP will not be granted official party status because the law says a party needs at least 12 seats to be recognized. The NDP was reduced to just 7 seats in last month's election.
Now, why is that? Well, other than the obvious, a story came out recently that actually lends credence to why the NDP didn't get more seats. And it's because they tried to save Jagmeet Singh. Inside the NDP's last-ditch efforts to save Jagmeet Singh and his riding.
In the dying days of the federal election campaign, senior New Democrats made a desperate last-ditch attempt to save Jagmeet Singh's Burnaby, BC seat. Some say it was unwinnable. At least 20 staff from the party's Ottawa headquarters packed the leader's campaign plane just days before the April 28th election, hitching a ride to the West Coast with a mission to door knock on his behalf. This was after a small team were sent to Burnaby Central earlier in that month. The cross-country venture was a waste of resources when the party was fighting for its life in other, closer races, according to 3 frustrated sources within the party, who spoke to CBC News on condition they not be identified because they were not authorized to speak publicly. Singh placed a distant 3rd in Burnaby Central, losing to Liberal Wade Chang by more than 12,000 votes. The party as a whole lost 17 of its 24 seats. But there were 8 other incumbent ridings where NDP candidates placed second and obtained a greater vote share than Singh, which, sources say, the party had a better chance of retaining. In the riding neighboring Singh's, New Westminster, Burnaby, Mayoardville, incumbent MP Peter Julian lost by less than 2,000 votes, for example.
So, not only did Jagmeet Singh run this party into the ground for the sake of his pension, he ran it into bedrock after digging up 12 feet of dirt to try and save his own skin in his riding.
Well, this just shows he is, what we've been saying this whole time, extremely bad at politics because I mean, the parties get internal numbers from reputable pollsters that tell them exactly how far behind they are in the race. There is no way Jagmeet Singh did not know that he was so far behind it was almost not worth the effort, and that there were other ridings like Julian's that could potentially be saved if resources were focused in those areas.
And here's the irony here, folks. If he diverted some resources to those other ridings like Peter Julian, and Peter Julian managed to win, that's your natural next leader for the NDP party because A, he's an incumbent MP, and B, he speaks French and English, and C, he's been on committee, and D, he was one of Jagmeet Singh's top advisors.
Well, and he was their deputy leader, was he not?
Right. So you lost your number 1 and your number 2 for the party, leaving essentially just the blank caucus left to pick up the scraps.
Well, and here's the thing I don't understand. Whether it's politics or whether it's elsewhere in life, the captain goes down with the ship and he tries to save as many of his crew as possible. It doesn't sound like that's what happened here.
No, it sounded like if Jagmeet was, the Titanic, he was like, hey, where's that iceberg? Let me just steer this thing right into it. which ironically probably would have helped the Titanic, but let's not, you were in the analogy here. But this is what you have with the NDP. Now we're back to reality. So we know why the NDP have 7 seats now, and only 7 seats. But there's going to be some consequences for Mark Carney and the Liberals denying the NDP the option of even attaining party status. Don Davies was on with Vashi Kapellos recently on CTV, and he put some hints down that are very obvious to us.
To be clear, I didn't deny the request. In the law, 12 members are required to have recognized party status in the House. So I was merely stating fact. In order to change that, it would require a broad consensus of the House of Commons, a consensus that I'm unaware exists as of this point. However, there have been a number of constructive conversations with Mr. Davies. I know he's had some with some of the other opposition parties. He certainly has with me. I'm very open to entertaining some of his more practical requests.
Okay. let's just break that apart. So he is correct that parliamentary procedure does dictate that you must have 12 seats in order to attain party status. We've talked about this on Northern Perspective many times. Now, Steve McKinnon is trying to position this as, well, I didn't deny him party status. I can't deny him party status. It's just in the law, and that would require broad consensus, which I'm not aware of exists. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, this is what would have to happen to grant the NDP party status. Someone would have to raise a motion. They don't have to change the law. That's different. They don't have to introduce a bill. Someone would just have to introduce a motion to accept the NDP party status as having only 7 seats. Someone would have to second that, and then they would need consensus, or not consensus, but they would need a majority vote in Parliament.
Yeah, I don't even think that they would need unanimous consent.
No.
I think they would just need majority to pass the motion.
So you have to ask, okay, so what majority would that be? That would be the Liberal Party and the NDP. Done.
So by that, we can assume that the Liberal Party is not in support of this.
Right, which is fascinating. Now, let's get to Don Davies.
Here to talk a bit more about the party and its direction during this sitting of the House of Commons on this first day back for MPs is the interim leader of the NDP, Don Davies. He's live with me here on Parliament Hill. Hi, Mr. Davies. It's good to see you. Thank you for making the time.
Good to be with you, Vashi.
I did want to start off on official party status. It sounds like the government is not prepared to facilitate a process that would allow for that. Do you understand the position that it would be a slippery slope if that precedent were to be set?
Well, yes and no. I mean, there's a couple different routes. What the NDP really wants is we're going to do our job no matter what. But we want the tools that will allow us to participate fully in Parliament. These are legislative research, communications, resources that will help us do our job better. As you know, Vashi, Parliament is complex. It moves fast and it changes. And what we're looking for is the ability to bring the voices of 1.2 million Canadians to this House and to effectively participate in the affairs. So official party status is an elastic concept. It has been changed many times in provinces across this country. Conservatives to Liberals, Liberals to NDP, NDP to Greens, even CAC relaxed the number with Solidaire and with Parti Québécois. So it's something that can be worked with, but really what we're interested in is just getting the resources that we need to do our jobs better.
I ask this with great respect, but why does your party deserve them? Yes, there are 1.2 million Canadians who voted for you, but you had an 11-point-something% drop in the popular vote, the worst outcome seats-wise for your party since its inception. Like, why do you deserve parliamentary resources if you couldn't hit that number?
Because it's
or come close to it with respect.
Because it's a minority parliament. And in a minority parliament, every vote counts. And so when you've got a government that has 169 seats and they need 172, and we have 7 seats, very often our party is going to be called upon that to make the difference. And so for us to be able to understand what legislation is being called and when, I think is important to make this parliament function well. So it's a question of ensuring that all the parties in a minority parliament are able to discharge their responsibilities in a responsible way and make it function well. So that's why I think it's a little bit different now than in a majority parliament.
So let me get this straight. The NDP deserves parliamentary resources, not because they worked really hard during the election, not because they got enough seats to actually warrant them, but because it's a minority parliament.
Well, and that's where the veiled threat comes in. So what Don Davies essentially is saying there, he's not talking to Vashi Capellos, he's talking to Mark Carney and the Liberals. What he is saying is, listen, buddy, this is a minority parliament. So you're going to need votes. And who do you think is the party that you're going to come knocking to actually get those votes?
It's not going to be the Conservatives.
No.
It's not going to be the Bloc.
No. It's going to be the NDP. So what he's saying there is, listen, we don't get party status, that's fine. But when you come knocking, don't expect us to support you on every single vote. Don't expect us to support you on any vote. So that's a really interesting, shot back. Now, if I'm Don Davies, and I would never be Don Davies because I would never be part of the NDP party, never mind the interim leader of the NDP party, but hypothesize with me. If I'm Don Davies, of course this is what I'm going to do. He has to do whatever he can to try to get party status back for the NDP. It gives you more money and it gives you more resources in the House of Commons. And it allows you to sit on committee and you get priority during question period. Right now, we won't hear from the NDP in question period until the very end when the actual parties are done talking.
Right, and you might not hear from them every single question period. In fact, you probably won't. They're treated as independents, where maybe they get a few questions every session.
And that's if they have time.
Right.
Because if you recall, there was many question periods last Parliament where Elizabeth May never got to ask a question. Kevin Wong and the other independents never got to ask a question.
Right, but what I mean by session, I mean by fall session and winter session or spring session. So for those 4 months out of the year, 4 months and 4 months, they get maybe a handful of questions. And again, if there's time, it's definitely not every question period.
And the NDP surely know the value of being in committee now that all the parliamentarians know how much committee is now watched by Canadians across this country, which that has been a recent change. So they know that these clips make it online, and they know that their voters or potential voters are going to be looking at this, and they want to see how the NDP is going to perform.
Well, sorry to cut you off, but I think that's a really, really good point, is that the NDP want to be seen in committee. They want to be seen in question period. They want to be seen by their voters as working hard for them. They want to be seen by potential voters as working hard for them. And they won't have that opportunity because they're not going to be in committee, and they will be very sparse in question period. They will be lucky if they have questions.
So what does this do? Well, this is a huge blunder by Mark Carney and the Liberals, in my humble opinion, because you've now made an adversary out of the NDP in a minority government. Not very smart. Now, does this mean that the NDP are going to be voting non-confidence on the throne speech? No. The NDP are not prepared to go to an election right now. They have an interim leader. Their party is broken. They need to regroup, and they need to get a strategy back together. And although they didn't spend a ton of money in this last election, they need to recoup from that. So they need a whole new direction. They need some time. But
right. And the Liberals know that. Mark Carney knows that, because he's essentially saying, well, we're not giving you party status. Vote non-confidence if you want, but we don't think you will, because you can't afford it and your party's in shambles, so you won't.
Well, and this is the big mistake from Mark Carney, the CEO and the CEO banker, is in the private sector, when your opponent's down, you kick them and you hope that they're never going to get back up, and you do whatever you can. The problem is politics isn't like that. Politics is fluid. It's like nature. It changes constantly, and you may have a political party that's down in the dumps in one session, and then in the next election they come right back. You'd think the Liberals would have learned their lesson on that one. So you have this case where Mark Carney and I think Tanya's nailed it, is basically looking at this as ego. Like, I don't need you, and plus, you're not prepared to vote us down, so I don't need you. You sit down and be quiet, like the commoners you are. You don't you know who I am? I'm Mark Carney. So this seems to be the attitude that is being taken right here, and it is not a smart political play. It is actually a huge mistake, because now the NDP are going to be that much more amicable to working with the Bloc and, dare I say it, the Conservatives. And you're going to be seeing the NDP try to get noticed in any way that they can. How are they going to do that? Well, that means potentially being disruptive in debates with the Liberals. That means potentially asking the Conservatives or the Bloc if they can borrow a seat during committee. And let me tell you this, I think the Conservatives are going to be playing a lot more nicely with the NDP in this session, just because they need the NDP to get votes back. And I don't think you're going to hear virtually any demonization of the NDP from the Conservatives. They may even, applaud them in more than one situation. And it wouldn't surprise me to see an NDP MP rotate into committee so they can actually take some pot shots at the Liberals to get some of these votes back.
Well, and you know that saying, the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
So it's in the NDP's best interest, and the Bloc and the Conservative, that the NDP does well, because they're not going to be taking voters away from the Bloc. They're not going to be taking voters away from the Conservatives. They're going to be taking their voters back from the Liberals. So this is going to be the interesting drama that plays out here, because Carney is not running this smartly at all. He has been making bad political decision after bad political decision. This is turning out to be a gong show for Mark Carney
Already.
Right. And so you're just going to have the NDP just chipping away at Mark Carney and the Liberals, and it literally is going to be death by 1,000 cuts. And one day, and my bet right now is next budget, if there is a budget next year, if there is a budget vote next spring, that could be when the NDP says, okay, time to go. But that's if they've gotten their wagon fixed and a new leader installed and they have their act together. But the way this is going, Mark Carney is guaranteeing this is not going to go for 4 years, and this is going to drop in the next 18 to 24 months. Because if he doesn't make a friend of the NDP, Mark, where are you going to get the votes?